Welcome back to the Advisory Table, our series of fireside chats with industry influencers and thought leaders. Today, I'm excited to welcome a partner in the Municipal Law Department of McCarthy Tétrault. He is someone I myself have worked with on several complex planning projects. Please welcome today's guest, Michael Foderick. Why don't we jump right into it?
Please.
Okay. And I think maybe just by way of background, it's interesting maybe for our listeners who aren't in the industry to understand a little bit about what role planning and real estate lawyers play in shaping cities. Maybe you can give us a little bit of that background as a start.
Right, yeah. So in Ontario, the way planning approvals are done is through the municipalities, but there's almost always an appeal available to the Ontario Land Tribunal. OLT used to be called the Ontario Municipal Board, is what some people still know it as. And it is a avenue to sidestep municipal approval processes, essentially. And so anyone who is frustrated by how long or how intransigent city staff are in approving or refusing their application, there is an OLT appeal available to them, which is what I do. So even when we're making an application and we don't expect it to have to go to OLT, we tee it up so that we're ready for that should it be necessary. Should the city take more than 6 months to approve us? Should the city give us feedback that is completely inconsistent with what we want to do? So yeah, a municipal planning lawyer like myself often will be involved right from the start to sort of pick who the consultants will be so that we are the right team should we need to take it to the OLT, and to help shape the development in a way that's lean and mean as best chance of success.
And it's common practice really for developers and design teams to over-design in a fashion where you're asking for more than you would get. I think that's a good segue into the next question, frankly, because I think it all comes down to, okay, so we're all on the same page. We want housing, we want community benefits and et cetera, et cetera. And you know this better than anybody, and perhaps you and I both know this better than anybody. The journey in getting there is often very painful.
Can be.
Are we too bogged down in planning bureaucracy, specifically in Toronto and the surrounding area?
Absolutely. In general, it's a huge yes to that question, in my opinion. There is a caveat, though, I'll put on it. So left to their own devices, the municipalities aren't shy about making developers wait years for approvals. It's very common. And as you know, Michael, adding that to a pro forma, adding years to a return on capital is typically very disastrous to that pro forma. And there's no appreciation at all by most municipalities that time equals money. And so their delay ends up making projects unrealistic or not ideal. The caveat I want to put on it, though, is that I'm not sure everyone's aware of all of their options to speed up that process, and in particular, appeal to OLT. The appeal timelines are sometimes as little as 90 days for making an application.
We just did this ourselves.
Yeah.
We were waiting for an OPA to come in, and we said, how about let's just stop waiting and go to the
Exactly.
OLT.
Take the bull by the horns, right?
Yeah.
And some people, and that doesn't mean you always appeal at the first available opportunity, but it does mean that if you're made to wait years, you are partly done that to yourself, because the current law around development approval in Ontario doesn't require you to wait that long. And as much as someone might loathe the idea of going to the OLT or availing themselves of their statutory rights of appeal, it will get you a definitive end date. And usually, as we've talked about a moment ago, much better outcomes than you would ever be given by the grace of the municipality itself, which is prone to all sorts of political considerations. And I should note that the OLT is not a political body. It is a arm's length quasi-judicial tribunal where evidence guides the way. So if you have the type of project which would benefit from that sort of sober analysis, I think it might be time to consider an appeal to the OLT, even if for no other reason to get to the same result quicker. Anyway, I know I sound biased because I'm such a fan of it, but it's worked out so well for so many of our clients.
A lot of the clients that I've worked with in my capacity as a project advisor,
right?
They're not the large development companies,
right?
Okay,
right.
They're project owners who are oftentimes lay people or third or fourth generation landowners who now say, okay, let's, this piece of property has been in our family for years and years. Let's develop it. We need experts at the table, et cetera, et cetera. And what's my observation is most daunting for them is the approval process and the over bureaucratic.
Amen. Yes.
And so that's why I asked you that question. I asked you a question I knew the answer to. Yeah. And of course is yes.
Yeah.
It is too.
Some municipalities are worse than others. I would say that, one thing that it's amazing, and I'll resist the urge to name specific names, but there's just one property owner I've worked with who has a lot of property, held it for decades and decades in his family. And he called up city planning because he's an industrious guy. He thinks he'll call them on his own. Yeah. And they said, the most you'll ever get here is 10 stories or whatever it was. Yeah. And he took that as the gospel truth, as if you would call the municipality and ask, what's my tax bill this year? And you expect to get the gospel truth on that. Right. Or as you would call them up and say, can I get my water service upgrade? Or one of the other million, can I get a parking permit? Or one of the other million questions you would ask the municipality. Yeah. He expected to get a straight answer. Instead, what he got wasn't a straight answer. He got an opinion. The municipal's opinion on what is. And that's so important to remember. What the municipality thinks or tells you, and they might be very emphatic in this, tells you that they will give you on a redevelopment, a rezoning, is merely their opinion. They are not the final authority on it. Yeah. In Ontario, we can appeal to OLT, who completely can overrule the municipality where appropriate. They don't do it in every case, but where there's that ability. So you're not, when a municipality tells you the most they'll ever support is X, do not take that as the final answer.
If anything, you should look at that and go, great.
That's a starting point, maybe. Yeah, sometimes it is. Because and I think the reason why there's so much bureaucracy is, and I'm sorry to report this, there is a heavy predisposition against development within many municipalities' planning divisions. And again, I'm sorry to report that because it brings me no joy to do it. But there is this false assumption by a lot of planning departments that somehow development is inherently bad. Well, we're in this business because we know development is generally inherently good.
If you could change one thing about the approval process to support better development outcomes, what would it be?
Number one thing I would say might surprise you is I wouldn't say that we need a fundamental change to the process as it exists today. Actually, Ontario's got a pretty good process relative to other jurisdictions. I would say people should know how they can avail themselves of their rights they already have to go around the municipality if needed and go to OLT quicker and to get quicker, better outcomes. So the number one thing I would say is getting to OLT quicker. And the second thing I would do is I would impose upon municipalities more discipline statutorily than they have now on responding in a timely way and actually giving feedback, even if it's not what we want to hear. It's not acceptable that we sometimes wait 6 months, a year. It's not uncommon to see municipalities go years without reporting out on an application. But as I said, as a developer in Ontario, if they do that to you, although there should be statutory provisions to rein them in on that, if they do that, you do have to own some of that yourself, because the Act already says you don't have to wait that long. You can pull the ripcord earlier. Right. So I think that the number one takeaway would be to speed things up. People should fully avail themselves of the rights they already have. Yeah. And if there was a way to make municipalities respond quicker, that would be probably positive as well. That would be, I said, what would you say is the number one thing that could change?
Yeah, I mean, obviously timelines, right? Although what I've been seeing a much better turnaround, I have to say, and maybe that's because the cities are dealing with a lot less applications these days, perhaps. But I have been seeing some improvement on that. The file we just worked on wasn't terrible.
Well, I think there's a recognition that certain types of files, there's going to be density around major transit station areas. There, for example, there's such a strong provincial direction on that now in the various planning instruments that where we had fights, we're having fewer fights over those things. So, but you're right, there might be a lower volume as partly attributed to it as well.
I guess the one thing that I would say, though, truly maybe my real answer is, that, we come across a lot of rigidity sometimes, right? I think anything should be on the table. If there are certain things that the city has decided, at least in Toronto, are not on the table.
Right.
And the things that they are willing to put on the table are, like for example, I don't know, oftentimes parking requirements or bike
Minimum bike zone
minimum
parking.
bike parking and stuff like that is never on the table. It's not on the table.
Right.
But like density is.
Right.
Like how much more complicated is a discussion on density
Right.
than is bike parking?
Right.
So you are willing to talk to me about density,
Yeah.
but not about bike parking?
well,
why are you so rigid on
You
that?
know, and that's so if I had to say a second thing, I would going where you're going is design guidelines. You're talking about guidelines around numbers of bicycle parking spots and whatnot, but design guidelines, the city, one complaint I often hear about our skyline is that it's not as beautiful as it could be. There are other skylines in the other cities in the world that are more beautiful, and one has to remember that it's not because we lack originality among our architects here in Toronto.
It's because of the design guidelines.
The design guidelines, which are that we have arm wrestling matches all the time about. They want the podium to be a certain height. They want the tower to be set back a certain number of meters from that podium. And there's some flexibility, but it is shockingly little. And so you end up with buildings that look bland. So I would say municipality robotically applying design guidelines is unhelpful to good architecture, unhelpful to beautiful projects. So that's another thing I would change. I would throw out the rigid design guidelines.
That's my answer. You asked me what would be the one thing I could change.
Throw out design guidelines.
That would be it.
Let architects design.
Not throw them out.
Yes.
But let's not have as much rigidity.
De-emphasize them. And when architects and developers come forward and say, we want to do something truly unique, we want to do something very beautiful, something eye-catching, something that we're going to differentiate ourselves by how beautiful it is, not have them respond with, well, it doesn't fit our cookie cutter.
Okay, last question. I asked this question to all my guests.
Yes.
What's your 6 to 12 to 18 month outlook on the market?
I'm positive on it. If you mean the housing market, I mean, the fundamentals that drive the need for more housing are there.
Yeah.
That I don't foresee changing anytime soon. My 2026 is fully booked at this point, so maybe that colors my perspective. But, as long as those fundamentals driving the housing market don't change, I'm very optimistic about it. And, when I think back to when the market was red hot, so many clients of mine lamented about, I wish land prices were cheaper. I wish that municipalities had the capacity to process my applications a little bit faster. And so this is the thing you've been waiting for.
I know.
Right? This is, and
here's the opportunity.
Once the bounce happens, everyone's going to panic and want to get in, and they'll have that fear of missing out. Now's a great opportunity to get in.
I love that answer.
And to double down and investing in housing. In Toronto, if you look at those charts over the course of decades, over 100 years, they generally there's some tiny peaks and valleys, but they generally only go in one direction. I have no reason to believe that isn't still the long-term trajectory. In fact, I'm more optimistic than ever that it is.
I love that answer.
Yeah.
Regular viewers of our series will know that I had a friend of mine on, Bassam Hanna, and I asked him the same question, and his answer was amazing. He said, this is the most this is the greatest, most opportunistic market I've ever experienced in my life because of all of the things you just said, because of the fact that land values have dropped, because of the fact that municipalities are more ready to approve and make deals on things, because of the reasons that, so many starts have been delayed that come 2028, 2029, 2030, there's going to be a need for, so if you build now, and it takes you 2 years to get the product onto the market, they're going to be swallowed up because you're going to be the only game in town.
Right.
That I keep trying to impress upon people that, and I do it through the knowledge sharing that we have with this series, that there is reason to be optimistic. The sky isn't falling, and
I'm not seeing evidence. I think it is overhyped, the amount of negativity. As someone who works in this field every day, I don't see the type of negativity that I see in some headlines, for example. Most of my clients are still moving forward. Some have changed projects from condo to rental, for example. Some have decided to take time to sort of retool and to say, we were going to put a shovel in the ground, but now we're going to go back and get more height, or we're going to go back and remove the non-residential component or whatever, polish up the deal a bit. So we're seeing some of that, but the fundamentals that drive the need for housing remain there, and those aren't going to abate anytime soon. We're talking about houses here.
Yeah.
Where, the expression "safer than houses" is there for a reason, right? So this is a great time to invest in residential real estate. I'm just so bullish in the long term about where that's going to be. So I've got my career on it, and I think I'm right.
Michael, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, sir.
I really
Likewise.
appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.